Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Quadruple D. So, my cold has come roaring back. There's a real resurgence here. So, I'm going to continue my trend of splitting these episodes up into at least two different parts because it's just hard for me to talk when I'm like sneezing and stuff. So, um, you know, in this episode, I could have talked about Iran's new leader, which seems to be a big story for the week. But let's get into some of Trump's corruption, because it does seem to be pretty much endless. There's no way I'm going to be able to cover it all in this episode. In fact, if I even tried to cover it for like a week long series or maybe even a month long series, I probably could just barely scratch the surface of how corrupt the Trump universe is. But I'm going to get into some of it though. And a lot of credit goes to ProPublica for getting into these details. So I assembled what they put out there. And a massive competition right now is underway for Pentagon contracts tied to a proposed missile defense system designed to detect and destroy incoming missiles aimed at the United States. Thousands of firms are seeking a share of what could become tens or even hundreds of billions of dollars in military spending. So, programs of this type are not new. The United States has pursued similar projects for decades, including the Strategic Defense Initiative under Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, and later missile defense systems run by the Missile Defense Agency. And these efforts mainly enrich defense contractors while offering uncertain protection, since intercepting fast moving ballistic missiles is technically difficult and often unreliable in real world conditions. And in the current race, several companies already appear to have an advantage. At least four firms received early contracts, and they are owned by Cerberus Capital Management, a private equity firm founded by billionaire Steve Feinberg. So imagine that, a billionaire associated with the Trump administration. How strange. That's like so unseemly. You would never imagine a billionaire being associated with, the Republican Party. Anyway, Feinberg now serves as the U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense, the second highest official in the Pentagon. He was confirmed by the Senate in March 2025 after decades running Cerberus. And, that company manages tens of billions of dollars in assets and has invested heavily in defense related industries. Well, maybe we shouldn't call them defense because quite often they are being used as offense, you know, instead of actual self defense. We're out there bombing all sorts of different countries and, setting up dictatorships and sometimes giving a lot of weapons to terrorist groups and stuff like that. And although Feinberg filed paperwork saying he divested from Cerberus, or however the hell that's pronounced, disclosure documents indicate he still maintains a financial relationship with the firm. So, this situation illustrates the revolving door between corporate power and the state. Large investors and government officials frequently move between industry and regulatory positions, shaping policies that benefit the same sectors that previously employed them. And this is exactly why I've said before that you need to regulate corporations or they end up regulating you. See, that's how it goes, unfortunately. I understand the whole libertarian distaste for the idea of regulating industry or anything like that. I get that. But nevertheless, these corporations, which, are said to love freedom so much, they end up getting into these government positions and they like, to have these corrupt special favors and they donate to these campaigns and quite often they run for office or they get appointed to certain positions because of all the money that they, pump into these politicians' careers and such. And the dismantling of ethics safeguards has made these conflicts even more visible. On January 20th, 2025, the first day of his second presidency, Donald Trump rescinded Executive Order 13989, a Biden era rule requiring executive branch appointees to sign an ethics pledge. Well, I mean, that just shows you how corrupt Trump is, because obviously even if you take an ethics pledge, it doesn't mean you have to actually follow the ethics. Everybody knows that. You can pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, like all of these politicians do, yet they end up betraying the country in one way or another. It's just something you do. You like you go to school, and in the morning they have that pledge of allegiance. It doesn't mean all the kids really exactly feel that way. They're just doing it to fit in a lot of cases. You know what I mean? And that's the same thing with, like, these politicians, when they take an oath saying they're not going to screw the country over or violate the US Constitution. They don't take that seriously. It's their like a presentation. It's a way of looking like you're serious and you're a good person and all that kind of stuff. But once you get into power, you can be corrupt as hell. You can violate people's basic due process rights and all kinds of stuff like that. But even that ethics pledge was too much for Trump. He was like, "Nah, let's not even pretend anymore that we have ethics. So let's get rid of this crap. Let's make it so it's not even symbolically something we do." And that pledge had at least supposedly barred officials from working on matters connected to their former lobbying work or clients for 2 years. And removing the order eliminated one of the main formal barriers intended to limit conflicts of interest inside the executive branch. Well, then again, I don't know how formal it actually was. It doesn't really matter if you don't enforce these things. I mean, that's something I think we've found out quite a lot, in the especially in the second Trump administration. In the first one, there were a few more guardrails, people keeping him more on track and just relatively normal. But now it's like there are no ethics. He's just unhinged. He feels like he has absolute immunity because, well, the Supreme Court gave him near absolute immunity. Technically, there are still ways to hold him accountable, but try telling Trump that he's got it in his head that he can do anything he wants and that there's nothing there to stop him. And soon afterward, after getting rid of that cute little ethics pledge, the administration removed key watchdogs. So that's a fun thing. At least 17 inspectors general across federal agencies were dismissed early in 2025. These officials are independent investigators responsible for uncovering fraud, corruption, and waste within government programs. So, why would Trump want to get rid of those people? Isn't one of his regular talking points getting rid of fraud, corruption, waste, and abuse, and all that kind of stuff? It seems like he wouldn't be getting rid of those if he really was interested in finding waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal agencies, that operate throughout the country and technically, the world, because what happens here will inevitably have some sort of effect throughout the entire world. Well, maybe not the entire world, but pretty close. You know what I'm saying? A federal judge later ruled that the firings violated legal requirements that Congress receive advance notice and a detailed explanation. However, the court still declined to reinstate the watchdogs. So, way to go, courts! It's another thing, that is a weakness in our system. Like he can finger wag at somebody, but then just not do anything about it. So we're finding that these courts do not have as much power as some people might hope. You know, so we're getting insight into a deeper structural problem here. Oversight bodies are meant to restrain state power, but they remain subordinate to the same institutions that they monitor. And when politicians or when political leaders remove them, there are few mechanisms capable of forcing accountability. So financial conflicts extend beyond the Pentagon as well. Reports have shown that senior officials in the executive branch, including Attorney General Pam Bondi, I was going to call her Palm Bandy, Pam Bondi. I guess I've got a little case of dyslexia or something. But anyway, Pam Bondi carried out well-timed securities trades, in some cases selling stocks shortly before markets dropped following new tariff announcements. So, yeah, there is some trading going on that might involve insider information. And environmental policy shows similar overlaps between regulators and industry. Two senior scientists at the Environmental Protection Agency, who helped weaken the agency's assessment of the health risks of formaldehyde, previously held leadership positions at the chemical industry's main trade association. Formaldehyde, widely used in construction materials and manufacturing, is classified as a human carcinogen by the World Health Organization, making regulatory decisions around it particularly consequential for public health. And that's also another reason why Trump does not like the World Health Organization, because he will always place profits for himself and for industry, his corporate backers. He will put that over public health each and every time. He does not care about, health and human safety. And the Justice Department provides another example. Todd Blanche, formerly Donald Trump's criminal defense attorney, now serves as the department's second highest official. Financial disclosure forms show that he owned at least $159,000 in cryptocurrency related assets while overseeing decisions to shut down several federal investigations into crypto companies, exchanges, and dealers. So, yeah, it's like putting the fox in the hen house. The fox is there to regulate the hens. And meanwhile, Trump has openly defended the blending of public authority and private enrichment. His family has pursued multiple cryptocurrency ventures while he remains in office, a situation that allows investors, including foreign actors, to gain influence by boosting the president's personal wealth. Trump himself dismissed the criticism, telling the New York Times, and this is a quote now, "I found out nobody cared, and I'm allowed to," referring to his family's business dealings. And another controversial example includes a luxury aircraft. Now, this is one of the most famous examples. Trump accepted a Boeing 747, reportedly worth around $400 million, from the government of Qatar, or Qatar as some people pronounce it. I hear it both like 50-50. So I pronounce it like Qatar because I just think that sounds better, even if it's technically incorrect. But he accepted that Boeing 747 worth, you could almost say $500 million, and then authorized nearly $1 billion from a U.S. nuclear weapons program to refurbish it for presidential use. So he's stealing from taxpayers. Lovely. This is just out in the open. And taken together, these cases, they really show how state institutions and corporate wealth increasingly overlap. And this pattern is not an accident, but a predictable feature of centralized power. Political authority and economic elites reinforce each other, while public resources flow upward into private hands. And meanwhile, they want to say, hey, look at these evil immigrants over here. Look at these trans people. Look at these, non-Christians. Look at these, these gay people holding hands and getting married and stuff. And if it's not that, they'll look towards some other group. Like maybe it'll be like, I don't know, black people or Jews or any number of things. They will scapegoat anybody but the billionaires. And that was exactly how Nazi Germany functioned as well. I mean, the hatred was real, don't get me wrong. But there was also an element of, distraction while the state just plundered and people got rich, and the ruling class was able to rule harder. And it took a lot to take Nazi Germany down. And frankly, I don't know what's going to end American corruption, but hopefully it will not get to the point of a world war. But it kind of seems like there is one in the works, right? So this time around, as these extremists, these neo-fascists, as they gain more and more power, it seems like they're too incompetent actually to actually retain power for the indefinite future. But the danger here is that there might not be much of a future. We've got nuclear weapons, and I don't just mean the United States has them. Other countries do as well. And if you enter a world war, well, some of these apocalyptic visionaries, these Christian Zionist types, they might get their wish. Not that Jesus is going to come back on a winged horse or anything like that. No, that's not going to happen. But we might reach a point where it's basically a nuclear apocalypse, and that's what some of these people want. And in the next episode, I'll be looking at one of Trump's most corrupt pardons, and that is of a man named Juan Orlando Hernandez. And man, this is a bit of a doozy when it comes to corruption stories. But anyway, I'm going to take a break. My nose is all plugged up, as you probably can tell. So yeah, sorry about the my condition, but there's not much I can do about it at the moment. And I hope you still got some food for thought and enjoyed the episode to the extent that you can enjoy hearing about the looming Third World War and stuff.